Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I see a couple people joining already. Welcome to this Sales Hacker webinar. So glad you could be here. I'm your host today, Colin Campbell. I'm the Director of Marketing at Sales Hacker. Hopefully you're a regular and you know me now, but just in case you're new, I figure I'd introduce myself. You know what you signed up for, but just as a quick reminder, we're talking about sales process today, which sometimes sounds like a boring topic. But when you think about how you have to hit numbers coming up to year end, and there might be sticky stuff in your sales process. There might be places that are unnecessarily slow or inefficient. It starts to get a little bit more interesting, right? So here today to talk about like finding those little places, those tricks where you can get some extra efficiency out of your sales process is Ken Hulse. He is the head of sales enablement and training at Conga. He's been doing this for a while. So people, you're basically joining like a free training. You're going to hear some inside stuff of like what Conga does for their own sales process, where they find efficiencies, even some of the challenges they face. But a lot of this is the stuff that you train your own sales teams on, right, Ken?
That's right. Thank you for that intro, Colin. I'm happy to be here and happy to share some stuff today. For those of you who are new to this or are returners, we like questions. We like to have a conversation. Me standing up here for a half hour, 45 minutes, and just yelling at you is no fun for either of us. So I would encourage you to ask questions as you have them and ask for clarification and even challenge us because we don't have all the answers.
That's right. And as a Sales Hacker audience, you guys never let us down. I know my friend Michael Klein's on, or he will be joining shortly. I was talking to Michael on LinkedIn earlier. He joins, Ken, if you don't know, he's a regular. He joins all the time. This guy works full time, goes to college at night, and still makes time to join these webinars. He called this his master's in sales via Sales Hacker. Michael's always got great questions, and I know there's a lot of other people who will have good questions too. Let's start off, just so everybody's ready to talk and interact. If you wouldn't mind, go down to the bottom of your screen and open up the chat box. And just so we have a sense of like who we're talking to today, so we can try to customize a little bit, let us know like what your role is and where you work. And while all you lovely people are doing that, I'll just remind you, we're also recording this. So if you have to step away or you just want to share it afterwards, you can do that. You'll get the recording in your inbox within the next day or so. All right, so we've got Sales Ops Manager Kristen at Linux Academy. Hey, Kristen. Hey, Joe. Joe's the Lead Development Manager at iTelligence, a Sales Enablement Manager at Scout RFP. Hey, Lisa. Names are hard. Simon is CEO of Stamped AI, a tech-enabled audit firm. Cool. Hey, Simon. Thanks for joining. A VP of Sales and Marketing, Inside Territory Manager. Hey, Brad. Eduardo Orellana, Director of Ops at Tag Sales Accelerator in Costa Rica. We've got a Global Sales Director. A big variety today. This is great. I think that this is cool because we do have stuff in here that applies to everybody at every level. Like there's a lot of kind of immutable truths about sales process efficiency that Ken's going to share. So get ready, everybody. Get your pen and papers out. Think of the questions you have about your sales process, your struggles. If we have time, I'll make sure Ken gets to as many questions as possible. And with that, I won't delay anymore. Ken, where do we jump off here?
Yeah, so great, thank you. The title of the webinar today is The Path to Year-End Success. But as we sat down to really think about this, we figured that this was a big concept, and it really depends on how you define that within your company, maybe even your organization, or for our individual contributors, you personally. Again, as we talked about and brainstormed some of this, we thought about in some organizations, year-end success is to finish strong by hitting your forecast, or maybe it's wanting to land some big logos so you have bragging rights going into next year. At a rep level, it can be a couple of different ways. I want to close out my number. Maybe I want to, as we call it, wink, wink, sandbag into January, close what I have now and make sure I start off strong. But we want to make sure that we don't define this for you because it's going to differ from organization to organization. Right here at Conga, we have a unique situation in that our fiscal year ends in January, not December. So our goal at the end of the calendar year is to make sure that we're closing all of those prospects that are closing out budget at the end of the year. And then inevitably, you guys will see this, you see it probably too often, where priorities shift, things change, and you want to move things into, or they want to move things into January, and so you lose out on that. So we want to manage some of that too, because we're okay with some things slipping, because if we can close strong in December and January, it really sets us up to kick off our next year. So depending on what your success looked like, we decided to pick out the 3 pillars to focus on that hopefully will help you reach your goals. We'll go through them one at a time, and this is where we expect challenges and questions and maybe some input. But number 1, we're going to talk about practicing good hygiene. We're going to talk about executing efficiently, and then getting deals across the finish line. So starting with good hygiene. When we talk about hygiene, we're really not speaking about, I think about that poster, the 100 things that I need to know as an adult I learned in kindergarten. We did learn how to wash our hands, or you should have learned how to wash your hands in kindergarten. But what we're talking about is we're talking about data hygiene. And as with a lot of big concepts, when we talk about hygiene, the definition can be a bit squishy, because it's a concept that, again, can mean different things depending on your organization. So what we want to look at is, before you can define what cleanliness means, you need to define as an organization what matters to you, what matters to your company, and what matters to your results. We here at Congo, we don't have an official definition of data hygiene, but really loosely we preach keeping all opportunities up to date. So go ahead.
So that means for you, that basically means like in real time. So if you have a call, at the end of the call, the opportunity is reflective of what just happened, right?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I like to look at is if I'm out sick, or we had 3 inches of snow this morning, and it took me an extra 45 minutes to get into work this morning. And so if someone had to cover my call, is everything up to date that my manager, one of my coworkers, my partner, can jump in and know what's next and really be able to pick up on the conversation. That's what good hygiene means to us.
And so good. So it sounds like you focus on, any open opportunity. You're not necessarily as worried about the data that you have where an opportunity isn't open.
I'm glad you called me out on that, because that's not true either. So in our model, we have hunters and we have farmers, as we call them, territory managers and customer account managers. And so an opportunity may be closed, but that account is open. That account is open for the life of as long as a customer is a customer. Sometimes when we close them out, we do put them into drip campaigns and stuff like that we can talk about at a different time. But no, to your point, any call, any activity, anything that should happen, we need to make sure that that gets logged, because in our model as well, our CSMs may be managing the current customer, but any new business or opportunity gets turned back over to that territory manager. So that data has to be clean, and we have to have that symbiotic relationship between the two.
Right. Makes sense. Okay. And then so when you talk about hygiene, how do you break that down? Like, what are the specific things that you would look at to determine if something's hygienic or not?
Yeah, great question. We coach to logging all activity, regardless of what happens. We also preach keeping contacts up to date, and most importantly, what is keeping that deal or that account in motion. So again, at a high level, and it's one of those things, I'm going to be perfectly transparent here. We don't do a great job of it either. And it's a really hard thing, and it's hard for organizations to do. We're working on that. We're working on making sure, are my contacts true? Do I have the correct contacts? Because if I don't have the correct contacts, if I'm the CSM, am I reaching out to the correct person? Again, in our model, our decision maker is much different than the people that deploy it, than the people that are actually using what we sell. So you need to make sure that we have that type of data up to date, those notes. What do people care about?
Yeah, I think that's something that everybody who's ever had to manage any kind of customer relationship can identify with. Like I worked at a marketing agency and account management for about 5.5 years, and I always struggled to have my Salesforce records up to date. We didn't have a lot of tools at our disposal, so I was doing a lot of manual entering of just all the data. Like I didn't have a call recording tool or anything like that. But I ended up like, you go to a meeting room, maybe you don't have your computer with you, you're just on a casual call, you take notes in a notebook, and then you have to go type them into the record later. And it caused issues where, like, if I let my house get really, really dirty and only cleaned it for spring cleaning, basically, that's kind of what I was doing with note taking. And then I was managing a team and I still didn't find a way to really enforce that. So if anybody, by the way, if anybody is an attendee who has a secret to like always maintaining good hygiene, please share. But Ken, how do you guys, I know it's something you said you're working on, what have you tried, what doesn't work, and how do you enforce people keeping good hygiene?
Yeah, so we did two things. At the beginning of this year, we set out on a plan to make sure that our hygiene was at least, or our data was at least getting cleaned. And with that, we developed two tools that we are working through and working on. And the first one we call Now Conga, and it's our deal scorecard. The deal scorecard is a way for us to capture the data points that we need to tell us where we are in a deal. You can see the acronym here. Now Conga just worked. I wish I could take credit for this because I think it's genius, but it actually came from our GM in our UK office. He brought it from another company, so I don't want to give him too much credit. But as you can see, it lays out what are the big things that you need in a deal. This helps us at all phases of the deal. So if I'm into the discovery phase, these are a lot of the things that I'm trying to figure out. If I am an SE, I can go in and I can look at these things and I know exactly what's going to be happening when I do my demo. Afterwards, if I'm the CSM, I can take a look at this and see a lot of the reason why a customer purchased from us. So, which is very helpful because the number one reason that we have churn is that our customers don't implement either fully or correctly. Well, as a CSM, if I can go back and I can look at a customer who might be in jeopardy, I can see what their need was originally. I can see who the competitors were. I can see what their sense of urgency was with the why now. And I can work through those things and work with a customer and call back to what's going on.
So you've got, these are all like actual fields in Salesforce? How is this managed?
They are. These fields are in our CRM, and they're a mix of free form and drop downs. So, for example, the competitors is a drop down because we know the usual suspects. And then what we want to do is we want to work through the notes. So the need is going to change. And by the way, the need isn't I need a way to produce online documents. No, the need is I have a problem that I have to solve. That need also should carry what are the pain points that go with that need. So I have a very manual way of doing this process, which creates this pain. That's the need. The why now is what is the impact? And we'll get into this later, but we'll talk about, do I have a date that I have to meet? And it just really helps our people focus on what's going on.
Cool. Okay. So, so one of the ways that you enforce this is basically, it sounds like creating a clear way to even know if it's going on. Like I know one of my problems was everything was just logged as a task basically in Salesforce. And my only way of knowing if something was up to date was checking the tasks against the calendars of that rep, which looking back now is kind of insane. So it sounds like you've created a system where it almost doesn't matter how recently it was updated. If the information is there and true, then you can tell just by looking at these fields. And because they're fields, you can pull reports on it easily.
You can, and I wouldn't go so far as to say that it can just sit there with no activity, because when we look at our second tool, we'll talk about how we, as you will see, keep our rooms clean. But to that end, it does allow me to decide when I'm forecasting this deal, and it's a much easier conversation between a manager and a rep to say, you only have need and competitors, yet you are forecasting this for October 27th. Are you really going to close this deal? And so it helps. It's a conversation starter as much as it is mile markers along the way that you go through the process.
Okay. Okay, so I have two questions about two of these fields then. So what does network of power mean?
Network of power was a fancy way of saying decision-making process. So
Got it. Okay.
the D in decision process, it would have been now conduct, and we, couldn't do that. So
Right.
network of power is just, who's in control. And by the way, if I can expound on that a little bit, and we're going to get into this a little bit more, but that network of power is also who are your influencers, who are the users. We see in deals all the time that we might be selling to the head of IT, but a sales ops person is going to have an opinion. Sales director is going to have an opinion. And so how do they play in that in that process as well?
Right. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And then agreed success path is like basically a mutual action plan, some people call it, right?
That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Again, Kongam didn't work, so agreed
Right.
success plan.
All right. I like it. This makes sense. So this is kind of like a hyper intelligent way to qualify, but also just organize effort around deals. So this is tool number one for keeping hygiene,
Yes.
right? What's tool number two?
Yep. Tool number two is a dashboard that we developed. And this dashboard shows three things. It shows a rep's pipeline, it shows their bookings, and most importantly, it shows cleaning your room. The cleaning your room tab shows opportunities that have closed dates that are set in the past. So you can see here, obviously, this is a mock-up, but we have a close date in February of 2018, September and December, and we're in 2019 October. So it alerts reps, especially our reps that have a lot of accounts. So our growth reps carry anywhere from 400 to 500 opportunities. So this just helps them keep track of that. And then the other one is no activity in the last 30 days, what we call aged opportunities. Have you done anything with this opportunity in the last 30 days? Deal velocity at Conga dictates that if something sits longer than about 30 days, you don't have a deal. And what I mean by that is it's probably not going to close in the near future. So you need to make sure that you're still updating that. Are they in a drip campaign? Are they in some sort of follow-up plan? Did someone go on vacation? So this is a way for our managers and reps to look at this. So managers and reps can look at this, and they can actually work on deals that are deals.
So this is the kind of, this is really cool. I think maybe, some of our attendees have dashboards that are similar. I never did, but it would have been helpful. I can see even with this, having the ability to kind of let this be an afterthought. So I know you mentioned something about we were talking before we hopped on, you mentioned something about a golden hour. Can you explain a little bit how that figures into things?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we encourage our reps to do, so we are located in a suburb of Denver, Colorado, and so we're in the mountain time zone. We're in what you East Coasters and West Coasters call flyover. But so we have reps that work East Coast time, we have reps that work West Coast time. Generally, though, our reps come in 8 to 5-ish, Friday 8 to 1:30-ish, and work generally mountain time hours. So what they do is our East Coast reps will be in 7, and so they'll work, but then they'll put aside, the end of the day, they'll put aside an hour or 90 minutes for what we call golden time, to basically clean your room, to get yourself prepared. Our West Coast reps, our Mountain and West Coast reps do it in the morning, because they're not going to be calling into California until 8, 9 o'clock their time. So they actually block that time out on their calendar to get updated on where am I at, what should I be focusing on, and what's my plan for the day.
Okay, makes sense. Cool. So blocking calendar is a simple way to keep a to-do list. All right, so let's bring this back. We were talking about like sales process to help close the end of the year strong. And these are two things you can help to be proactive from here on out. But let's say somebody in the audience is looking at their hygiene and they're like, yeah, I don't think this is hygienic. What do we do at this point in the quarter, looking at end of year, or maybe an end of fiscal and even January? Like, where do we go next?
Yeah, and we're going to get into that a little bit in our next section. But again, I go back to the beginning of this section, and you've got to figure out what's important. What are some of the things that you can do right now? This can be daunting, as you said, Colin, when you look at your data and it's not hygienic, it's all over the place. We have reps that are doing 10,000 different things and we can't seem to wrangle it all in. Pick one, pick two. What are some things that you can start to put together? And that's what we did. We decided, and as we look at these two tools, this is where we started. This is by no means a finished product. We're still working on coaching what the now Conga should look like. Maybe the aged opportunity shouldn't be 30 days. Maybe it should be 45 days. Maybe it should be 19 days. We're still looking at that and picking these things out. And then we're slowly making sure that we are working through some of those issues and figuring out what we're missing.
Yep. Okay. Makes sense. I think it's a work in progress for everybody. I would be surprised if anybody here has perfect hygiene.
If they did, they probably wouldn't be with us today. They would probably be here instead of me. So with that, we want to talk about, and this is what I was alluding to with what are you missing? And you should always be looking at what's going on. Do you have the right stuff? Does the data that you're collecting actually reflect how a deal closes? Beforehand, it didn't. A lot of people are familiar with or use the BANT. Budget doesn't matter to us because of the way that we solve issues and things that we solve. Obviously, they have to be able to create budget, but it's not a deal killer. It's something that we sell a product that if we can show value, by and large, our customers will find budget for it. Number two is data is a shared responsibility. We coach our managers to not just yell at our reps to make sure their data is up to date because it's got to be something that they do together. This is what it should look like. We try to strive for a collaborative culture when it comes to those things. And that's why a lot of our, in our Now Conga, I mentioned that a lot of our fields are freeform because not everything fits in a drop-down, not everything fits in a specific way. So we want to make sure that we are giving people freedom to do what they need to do, but also make sure that we're building a way that it's consistent, as our third bullet shows, because consistency does matter. As I mentioned, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, someone needs to be able to pick up on my accounts and be able to do that. And if I have consistency, I can at least jump in and see where a deal is at.
A couple of the tricks and tips people are sharing in the chat, by the way, about keeping things hygienic for exactly this reason. Michael Klein, classic kicking in. Michael Klein, thanks for the share. Updates notes immediately after calls, so not moving on to a next task basically until the notes are in. Also using notes tab on each account a lot. Ralph says that maybe that's actually been a struggle because it seems to slow reps down. Mackie took a court reporting class. That's super interesting. So we're learning shorthand, Mackie. And then Jesper says you can't take notes outside of a CRM, a lesson I learned the hard way. Good point, Jesper.
Yeah, my sales career started before the internet, just to give you guys an idea of where I come from. So when Colin and I were discussing keeping notes in a notebook outside of your CRM, that hits home for me because I'm betting in my garage or in my basement somewhere, I still have a box of those notebooks where I kept notes about what was going on because, well, first of all, I didn't have a CRM and I used a telephone, and it's kind of funny. I think I mentioned this to you guys too, the Pursuit of Happiness, when Will Smith figured out that you don't put the receiver down. For those of you who don't know what a phone is, like my partner Seth, it's not a cell phone. You actually used to have to hang the phone up. But instead you just push the button. Those were shortcuts that we learned, and it's interesting how things have changed, and now everything, I sit back some days and I'm like, wow, all those notes that I took, why didn't I think of Salesforce? I could have been Benioff and been rich, but alas, I'm not. He did.
Ralph Gaglione's talking in code now. I don't even understand this, but you might. Sorry. He says, Ken, we used to use index cards on a 131 and 1 to 12 file. I don't know what those numbers mean. Oh, binary.
Yeah.
So we can all be thankful for having some automation, which, speaking of, there are ways now that we can get smarter with our data. It doesn't all have to be like this, right? So where are the tips there, Ken?
Yeah, so again, I go back to some things where you can, don't make them freeform. Someone mentioned that putting stuff in the note tabs slows reps down and gets them cumbersome. Are there places that you can look at that you're getting the same thing or the same answer over and over? In our Now Congo, we decided instead of having a free form for competitors, we would have a drop down because we see basically the same 3 to 4 competitors every time. If there's someone outside of there actually is in the drop down other, and you can make a note of that. And while I'm not in the business of disparaging our competitors, if it's one of those others, they're probably really not a serious threat because they're not exactly in our swim lane or the same pool or whatever metaphor you want to use there. So find those things that are repeatable, find those things that can be drop downs, and make sure that as we get into the next slide here, that you want to get smarter with your data, and you want to make sure that you are removing those reporting roadblocks. A big thing that I see in all the organizations that I've been, we build reports for one person or two people, or accounting says, I need to track this one item. Stop it. Make sure that your reporting is used for everybody. And that goes with sharing the wealth from the top down, because if you have reporting that is good enough and is usable enough, you can give intelligence to your managers that they can start to see trends. They can start to see things that are happening. They can communicate and help reps shift through the noise and find the signal. There's an Air Force terminology that I've picked up on that is ignore the ground noise and look for the signal. And that's what you need to do when you're selling, especially when you're in a competitive environment, especially when we're getting close to the end of the year. And that's where we'll start to kind of tie back to what the title of our webinar was, and that's, your path to year-end success, making sure you're focusing on the signal. And what that allows is for our leaders on the line, it allows you to stop wasting time spot checking and start gaining insights about you and your rep's business. We love Forrester, and we're going to start quoting some other research that we found in here. Forrester reports that 61% of sales managers have trouble gathering insights into current opportunities because of bad data. How much time does that cost you in your one-on-ones? How much time does that cost you in your team meetings? How much time does that cost you when you're setting forecasts, when you're doing those things? Bad data isn't just bad for reps. It's bad for your organization.
Yeah, it goes both ways. I mean, think about, like, if you're a rep, you sit down with your manager, how much would you love to not have your one-to-one be verbal updates, right? Like, if the data was all right, and some of it's frankly your fault for not logging your notes. Sometimes you need better enablement, and like there are tools or automations that you need to be asking for to save time so that you don't have to give manual or verbal updates. Yeah, okay, so good point. So people wasting a lot of time and also like missing opportunities because of bad data, missing insights. So I don't know, so what do we learn from that?
Yeah, great question. So kind of our last point on data, and then we'll move on to some more strategy stuff. According to Salesforce research, high-performing sales teams are 3.5 more times likely to leverage sales analytics. What do you think they're analyzing? Oh, that's right, data about their deals, right? Like I said, I'd love to tell you that we're 100% clean to date, but we're not. But we're working on it. And I go back to that chicken or the egg thing, right? That where do you start? This is such a huge problem, can be such a huge lift. I've been at Congo almost 3 years, and in those 3 years, we have acquired and merged with 4 different companies, and our data was all over the place. And it wasn't because it was bad, it wasn't good, but what we decided to do is we decided to start in 2 places, as I told you guys, and that was with the Steel Scorecard and also with the Clean Your Room and the pipeline dashboards. You got to find out some place that makes a difference. figuring out what that data means and figuring out how to organize it is going to be the winner there.
Yeah, I like the tip. I mean, this will change for every organization, right? But you could argue that high-performing sales teams are able to use sales analytics for better insights because they have the time to think about that stuff because they're already hitting their quota. But you could also argue, obviously, that those insights allow them to hit their quota. So it doesn't really matter what you believe, but if you see gaps in your data strategy or gaps where big insights would be helpful, like you did, find a jumping off point and take an action on it. That's really the only way to go. For you guys, it was those two tools, now Conga and the dashboard. For other people, it might be something else, but you turned it into like a bite-sized project that you could take and evolve from, which is smart.
Yeah, and we have some next steps that have come out of that. We've learned a lot, and it's helped us quite a bit.
I imagine, yeah. By the way, you said 4 acquisitions and mergers in 3 years?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's incredible. Congratulations and my condolences.
Yeah, well, it's been a wild ride. It's never a dull moment, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so you said some strategy stuff is next. What is that?
Yep.
What do we do?
So that's where we want to get into. And as we come up on the end of the year, it starts to get daunting. People start to think about the end of the year. They start to think about timing. We're mid-October now. And if you are wanting to close by the end of December, you have 2 big hurdles. At Conga, we have 3. For those of you who don't know Conga, we are very, very tied to the Salesforce ecosystem. Well, Dreamforce this year is the week before Thanksgiving. So we are likely going to lose 2 weeks of momentum because of Dreamforce, because of Thanksgiving. And then whether you celebrate holidays at the end of the year or not, a lot of organizations do and a lot of people do, and a lot of people start to go on vacation. So what we are driving towards right now, as I mentioned earlier, our end of year is January, but we're pretending like our end of year is December. So we're doing 2 things that we want to make sure that we are teaching our people to do, and that is identify your targets by looking at what's attainable and are there any varying factors, and then number 2 is that helps us stay clean for next year. It always happens. You forecast stuff, you have great conversations, you're talking to people about stuff that will land this year, and then priorities shift. They are moving things to next year. Maybe they're going to reallocate that budget. Maybe it's going to roll over. And folks, for our sales folks on the line, you already know this, but for those of you who don't directly sell, they really don't care about our quota. They really don't. They care about getting their business taken care of.
Yeah.
So with that, looking at your data, looking at your trends, looking at your things, have you looked at everything that you can leverage your team and you can for your team and be confident that you're moving forward? When you're looking at these things, for our leaders on the line, when you're having your one-on-ones, when you're having your pipeline reviews, ask the question, why are these the targets? What's the driving force behind these key deals? What do we need to focus on for year end? Ask the hard questions if you're a rep. When are you going on vacation? Are you going to be here at the end of the year? My first couple of weeks here was, I started with Conga on December 19th. I sat in on a lot of calls just to learn what we did and did a lot of shadowing. One of the hardest ones that I sat in on, I believe it would have been about the 21st or the 22nd. And I'm in the room with the manager and the rep and the sponsor. And the sponsor said, yeah, I forgot that my boss is in Barbados until January 5th. We aren't getting this deal done.
You hate to see it.
And it broke that rep's year. He did not finish his year.
Yep.
He didn't ask the hard questions.
Yeah. You got happy years.
He didn't ask. Yeah, you're right. You're right. So these are the big things that we're looking at. Is we're identifying those targets, and we're also trying to identify what's going to fall into next year, and we'll deprioritize that time.
Yep.
So
Yeah, makes sense. So you're not wasting time on stuff that's going to close next quarter anyway. You keep it warm, you keep it moving,
You bet.
but it's definitely not the focus, right? Okay, makes sense.
Right. Right. Yep. So that being said, you still have a pipeline that you have to manage. And you need to make sure that you're understanding the proper tactics for each target. What's a deal? What does it look like? Where are you devoting your time? Deals at different stages need different attention, and they need different activities. We coach our reps to actually map these things out. Colin, you talked about before putting tasks in and managing your pipeline with tasks. We do that too. But those tasks are associated to the things that need to get done, and they're dated as such.
Right.
But we also, and we want them to be digestible. Small things that I need to get done. Check back on redlining. Check back on movement of this piece of the deal. Did my demo happen? Have I sent my follow-up? Those are the types of things that you need to be doing. You need to go with the assumption that not all deals are in the home stretch. And one thing that I learned a long time ago, I wish I could take credit for this, but I've said it enough times that I can probably start to take credit for it, because the first time you have to attribute it, the second time you have to say that it isn't yours, the third time it's yours, right?
Yep.
You should do a lot of your heavy lifting in your 30-day pipe. If you think about it, if you have a quarterly pipe like we do, if you do the hard stuff and work towards that 90-day pipe in your 30-day, all of the goodness that you appreciate in the 90 days should take care of itself. I won't say that your stuff should be on autopilot, but if you're managing your pipeline early and getting a lot of the roadblocks out of the way and paving the way, and that's why that mutual agreed action plan is so important to us, because you need to make sure that you're hitting those dates.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's easy to get wrapped up in putting effort into closing a negotiation and chasing things, but sometimes you wouldn't have to if the mutual action plan discovery was really done right, if you put the time in up front. By the way, one of my favorite things for discovery is the 5 whys. I used to use it actually for its management tool. It's a good strategy tool. Like anything where you're trying to figure out something or just be smarter about something, if you have an observation, ask yourself why that's happening, and then ask yourself why again. 3, 5, doesn't really matter the exact number, but once you get to something that's like so obvious it's not helpful, the next level up is where you've got some really good insights. So you can use that for discovery. You can also use it to prevent the happy years where you think everything's going really well, like this is going to close. Really ask yourself, why is it going to close? And then ask yourself why again. And eventually you may find that there's a reason there, like a hidden reason why it might not. Anyway, my 2 cents. Take it or leave it.
No, it should be taken. It's I call it the 4-year-old effect. For those of you who have had a 3 or a 4-year-old, the question that they're constantly asking is why. And it needs to happen at all levels, right? You as an individual contributor, you as a sales rep, you need to be constantly asking the question to the customer, why? Why that date? What happens if we miss that date? What's going on? And then as a leader, you need to make sure that you're asking your reps and holding them accountable. Again, I learned very early in my sales career, I had a leader who had a whole bunch of acronyms. One of them that he had was NATO, not attached to the outcome. These deals are our children. They're our babies. We get so emotionally involved with them. We preach over and over that part of being trustworthy or gaining trust with an organization is getting to know people. So you know these people, you have a relationship with them, but you can't be attached to the outcome. You have to be able to look at it from a very almost a cynical view.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Misha Bartlett points out that the 5 whys originally came from Toyota, which is true, and I had forgotten. Thanks for the reminder, Misha.
Very good.
Okay, so we talked about like areas of focus, effort into your 30-day pipeline. We'll help you out later in your 90-day pipeline. What else do we do strategically?
Yeah, great question. So I hearken back again to when I first started selling, and my list and some of you may not remember or know what these are, but my list was the white pages. So my very first sales job, I sat in a cube that was no wider than my shoulders with a phone on it, and they put the white pages in front of me and they said, go to work.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, it was, I learned a lot. It was fun because, I was very young and there was a lot of young people, and that can be a fun environment. And this was in the days before we had as much, we had a lot of fun. I'll leave it at that. But that was the technology. The technology was this big, thick book and your phone. Now we have so many different things that we can use. As sales professionals, we have two finite resources, time and energy. We've talked about identifying your targets. We've talked about making sure you understand what's going on with them. But now how do you get to all of them? And how do you make sure that you are automating or working on some of those things that are early in those 30 days? So as we said, or as we hinted at, and we should say out loud, just because you're trying to close the year, you cannot ignore those things that are coming in now that are going to close in January, February, March. Because just because you want to eat now doesn't mean you don't want to eat in February and March as well. So are there some things that you can automate? Do you have a tech stack, and are you fully utilizing that technology? Anecdotally, we use SalesLoft here. We were not fully utilizing SalesLoft. I spent a bunch of time with them and have figured out some ways that we can use it a lot more efficiently. And now we're using it directly with our Dreamforce cadence, and it has paid dividends because we made a couple of adjustments, and we can report on those things, and we can figure out what's working, and so we can shortcut some of that stuff. The pace of business now is fast. Those manual efforts that I grew up on are antiquated. Thanks to Al Gore and the internet. For those of you who don't know that story, Al Gore takes credit for inventing the internet.
Brilliant, man.
Selling is now as much a science as it is an art. We still need people. There's still relationships. There's still things that you need to do. But boy, we've got to rely on technology to help us get to everything. Give your team an advantage and deploy strategically. Figure out where the weaknesses or inefficiencies are, because we want to make sure that we are shoring those up, because when they're most visible to the prospect, their customer experience can lack, and that is a differentiator. As we talk about things that help you some other things that help you in your sales process, we came up with 4 often forgotten things you need to close business.
I love this one.
Number one is, this is one that we talked a lot about when we were getting prepared for this. Proof points. Proof points are a funny thing. They come in white paper, they come in demos, they come in all of those types of things.
Case studies.
What we want you to, case studies, you betcha. How do you convey these concisely and efficiently? For customers, being polished stands out. They expect more now. Everybody has testimonials. Everybody has white papers. Everybody has that type of stuff, case studies on their website. Are yours different? Here's what I want you to think about. Think personalization and timeliness. Are you sending collateral that's relevant and personalized? Are you picking out those things that really ring the bell? How does it look when it's deployed? Do you have tech that will make this more self-serving? Do you have snippets that are plug and play? Like, can you customize? Can you engage? Is it trackable? Do you have things that make a difference? Prospects are funny things. They want to know that you are reliable and that you have great support, so brag about it. I tell our salespeople here all the time, when you think you have explained something well enough, you owe your prospect at least 2 more explanations. It really comes to this one with reliability and support. If you have good support and you have good reliability, brag about it. It's okay. Make sure that you're telling them how good you are. At Conga, we have what are, for those of you who are familiar on the Salesforce ecosystem on the App Exchange. Wow, that was hard. Anybody else feel that? On the App Exchange, people can give reviews. We have many, we're in the top 3, I believe, of 5-star reviews, total 5-star reviews. You can bet your sweet Aunt Betty that we brag about that every chance we get, because it matters.
You know, one of the things that we used to have happen at the agency, we spent a lot of time in the account management department trying to learn more about the sales process, because we figured if we understood the origin of our clients, like the story that brought them to us for strategy and service, we could serve them better. And it took us, we listened to all kinds of sales calls, we poured through notes and demos and, you know, proposal documents to try to understand that. And it took us a long time to figure out that the reverse should also be happening. So we started having our salespeople shadow our strategy calls and our service calls with clients a year, 2, 3 years into service. And they were like mind blown. And it did help a lot with they were able to paint a much truer picture and a warmer, like happier picture of what it would be like to work with us after that point. Not that we were necessarily focusing on reliability and support, but I just think like as an antidote to this idea that the sale ends when the document is signed, like not for the customer, right? Like they have to know what's going to happen afterwards. And it's easy as a salesperson to overlook that. So if you want to, just ask, like shadow some support calls or get with a CSM and have them tell you some stories.
Yeah, that's a great tip, Colin, and it's something that we do on our CSM side. We do have them track those types of things, and you're right.
That's awesome.
Understanding what happens on the customer side, because you're right. You know, I come from a time, the SaaS model of selling has changed a lot of things. I come from a time also I sold hardware, and you know, once I signed the deal, I just had to make sure that the stuff was going to be dropped off, someone else was going to install it. See ya. And never heard, you know, 3 years from now when I needed to replace the hardware, I would call back, but there was nothing that was done in between because there was someone else that handled that stuff. The world has changed. We have a lot of different things now. One of the other things that gets missed when you're talking about business is in today's world, you need to talk about security and compliance, especially if your prospect brings this up. You need to address it early and often. They don't want to be out on a limb. They don't want to be the next story of who was it recently, Dairy Queen got hacked and Jimmy John's got hacked and Yahoo just settled a huge lawsuit, and I saw a blurb on. I mean, it's getting so much that we're almost numb to everybody being hacked, but businesses want to make sure that you have something in place for that.
And some people think of that as an objection. It is not an objection. It's part of your service. You have to have something prepared and handled it. And if you aren't, you know, if the product isn't adequate, that's definitely something you need to feed back to your product team.
You bet. Finally, establish a trusting relationship. This is one of those things that every sales rep is taught. Everybody brags about it, but no one really talks about how to build trust. Trust is a funny thing because you can't just show up and say, hey, Colin, I'm a good guy. You should trust me. I got to prove it to you. And by the way, as a salesperson, I don't decide when the prospect trusts me. They decide when they trust you.
Yep.
So there's some things that we talk about. We teach our sellers to do little things. They may not get noticed when you're doing them, but they certainly are noticed when you're not doing them, like showing up on time. We teach a meeting structure that is similar. We have a cadence with the way that you do your meeting. You do an opening. We teach to do an opening fairly the same way. Then we do an agenda. Then
Hey, Ken. I don't know if you can hear me, but we cannot hear you. Okay, audience, can you guys hear me talking, or is it just Ken? that you cannot hear? Okay, can you hear me? And unfortunately, it looks like Ken can't hear us because he doesn't know we can't hear him. Thanks for the heads up, guys. Bear with us. We'll figure it out. Hey, something about your mic, Ken. We can't hear you. Can't hear. All right, he's got it. We're going to figure it out. Thanks for pointing that out, everybody. Happens. That's show business, baby. Hey, while we're here, guys, we've got 9 minutes left. So if you have questions you want to drop in, there's still some good tips and stuff coming from Ken. But if you have questions, throw them in the chat, and we'll try to get them answered. Like if any of this sticks out, is maybe you're dealing with some of this in your sales process. Maybe you have questions about like data efficiency or end of quarter prioritization. Let us know. We'll try to help you out. Still nothing. Let me see if no, you're not muted. This might be a case of you have to leave and come back. I don't know if you can. Do you want to try it? I need like hold music or something for situations like this. It doesn't happen often. Or maybe like a game where I can play with you guys. I do have a little game. We may not have time for it. Hum my favorite song. All right, you guys try to guess. Let me think of a song to hum. Okay.
How about now?
There he is. It was Scar Tissue by Red Hot Chili Peppers, by the way. All right, you're back. Thanks, Ken. We were playing random songs. Okay, so
my apologies. I think I'm going to blame the snow.
Yeah, it's the snow's fault. Don't worry about it. No problem. We'll pick up where we left off. We were talking about building trust. We said you don't get to decide when it happens. The prospect decides.
That's exactly right. So one of the things that we teach, one of the strategies, or some of the strategies that we teach, are making sure you show up to your meetings on time. Be a couple of minutes early so they don't arrive before you. Honor when meeting times end. Make sure that you're calling it out if it's 10 minutes before or if it's 5 minutes before, saying, hey, we have 10 minutes more. And never assume that a prospect can go longer. You should always say, in the next 10 minutes, we need to accomplish several things here. One of those things is scheduling some more time if it works for you. I argue with sales reps about this all the time. You should not assume more than an hour. Now, if they say I can stay on, then that's a different story. But It's about making sure that you're structured. It's about making sure that you're doing the things that that show that you honor them and that they can trust you for.
Absolutely. And by the way, with about 6 minutes left, I do have one or two questions here we'll try to get to, but I also want to make sure we get through some of the nicer takeaways you have in the rest of your content here, Ken. So just a heads up.
Indeed. This is one of those that we can probably push through. Just some more research that we pulled that we wanted to share. According to Salesforce, 79% of reps who understand a company's preferences and serve as a trusted advisor will win. And that's where we talk about understanding who they are, sending them the white paper, sending them relevant things that they mean or that mean things to them. According to Serious Decisions, that follows up 75% of buyers find sales collateral to be extremely influential in their selection of a vendor, especially if it is tailored to them. And then the other thing is, just like that poster from kindergarten said, show up, be first, Up to 50% of sales are won simply because a rep responds first and provides the right information.
That one's crazy to me. That's where like you walk away going, oh my gosh, it's so worth finding the places where I can be faster and looking for efficiency in my sales process, because you have a 50-50 shot of closing the deal over a competitor just because you're there first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Just to finish our point about documents, one of the things that helps build trust and one of the things that helps make you look like you know what you're doing is your branding consistent? Do you have a handle on what your logo is? We have, going back just in my tenure here, changed our logo 3 different times, and our color scheme. Are your reps using the right logos? Are they using consistent documents? Does it give the appearance that you know what you're doing? If they're not all over the place, then you know what you're doing and you can be trusted. And then the final thing is, are they customizable? And if they are they customizable in a way that you can make sure that you are keeping up with the changes that are made? I was telling these guys as we were preparing, just as a simple anecdote, and it sticks in my head. I was at a brewery over the weekend, and they had a poster about joining their beer club. And it said, for every beer you buy, you get credit. It's supposed to say for every beer you buy. How did you not catch that? Okay,
Yoda.
That's at a brewery, and most people are going to be like, I'll let that go. Your customers won't let that go. They will judge you for that.
And by the way, this proposals piece, this like organized documents piece is another efficiency and speed thing too, because if you don't have to one-off everything, and if you have easy ways to customize it, that's less process. Like it's not, I mean, it's kind of automation. It's automation of, and like taking the repeated decision points out of crafting these documents every single time you do it. You betcha.
And you also don't have to worry about version issues, brand issues.
Yep.
Are you attaching them in Salesforce? Because if we can't keep our notes in Salesforce, you're certainly probably not attaching your quotes.
Yep.
All right. In the 2 minutes that we have left, we will get deals across the finish line. To get deals across the finish line, especially at the end of the year, we teach our sellers to, as early as possible, identify a key date that you can tie decision timing to. We've identified 2 types of dates that we use: compelling event and critical event. We distinguish between the 2 by how the customer answers the question, what happens if you miss? So what date do you need this done by? I need X done by Y. What happens if you miss? It can probably move into next month. Or I will get fired. 2 big extremes there, but hopefully you get the point of what we're trying to make there. That if there is urgency on the customer's side, this allows you to turn the conversation to either a critical event that says, okay, great, we can work back from this date, or work within a compelling event to say, okay, what's the impact if you miss that date and you have to wait another month, another 2 months, another quarter? Different conversations, nuanced conversations, but good conversations that you can have, because then you can take every conversation back to these things.
Yep. And so when you find out somebody's on vacation, you say, well, maybe you should try to text him, because if you don't get this done, we talked about, like, you might get fired. Or you can also like prioritize, right? So if somebody just has a compelling event, maybe you just don't spend as much time on that deal as the other things in your pipeline, all things being equal, if you're focusing on end of quarter or end of year.
You bet. Great point.
That's an awesome tip. Can we
drive to the finish?
Just in the interest of time, I would love to talk about the speed on contracts too.
So skip ahead a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. I think this might be the next one.
Yep.
Because this is where, like, I think a lot of people experience some slowness.
Yeah, you betcha. And this is one that, as we had talked about, we wanted to spend some time on, because this is a big deal. Forrester did a study, and they found the average time required for a new contract to be created and approved, 3.5 weeks. So
Crazy.
If you have to account for that and you're driving to a date, you need to make sure that you're taking that into account. We touched on the holidays, and for us, Dreamforce and things like that, plus prospects trying to close their end of the year. You need to make sure that you're starting to negotiate those contracts now, and you're starting to enter into those conversations now. We're halfway through October, folks. We have, if you count Thanksgiving, and I'm not sure where the Christmas holiday falls this year. I believe it's a Thursday. So you just kick out those last 2 weeks. We really only have about 5 selling weeks left in the year. Scary when you pull back and think about that.
Yep,
so
it's happening.
You betcha. So just to think about those things. So some of the things that we've done with the contracts. Another study, I think this was by Gartner, said up to 80% of B2B transactions require a contract. So some of the things that we have done here at Conga to help save our reps time and more control is to give them some pre-approved terms so that they can negotiate with confidence. We also have tools that allow version control. So you can see when things have been redlined. You can see that when things are due, whose court the ball is in. It helps them give insight also to the buying behavior to make sure that they can accelerate deals where needed. Again, both Colin and I have Barbados on the mind, so making sure that if someone's going to be in Barbados, you can set up that time and make sure that you can help remove roadblocks. So how are you doing that? Do you have a self-serve model? Do you have some things that you can help your reps with?
Yeah, again, another place just to avoid the one-off decision-making. Like if you're 5 weeks out from end of year and you know it's going to take 3.5 weeks to do a contract on average, maybe a place to look at speeding it up and giving some guardrails built into the process, some custom branding built into the process, customizability to the documents built into the process, so that it's not something you have to do from scratch every time.
Oh, go ahead.
I think we're going to wrap it up, but I want to ask you, Ken, what do you want to leave us with? Any last big important takeaways for the audience here?
Biggest takeaway that I have, the biggest thought that I have for folks is be strategic, figure out who your targets are, be strategic with what you need to do, and be diligent within that strategy. The best sales reps I have ever been around are not the prettiest, they're not the best talkers, they don't have the best leads. They are the most organized and strategic. It's called a sales process for a reason. Work within your process, find places where you can work with efficiencies, make sure you are moving roadblocks out of the way, and ask the tough questions.
I love that. All right, diligent management of process. Hopefully that's all your focus now, leaving this and heading into the rest of your day. Thanks so much for coming, everybody. As always, asking great questions, good input. And Ken, thank you for joining and sharing all of your insights and experience from Conga. It's been awesome to have you. Thanks.